Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. Staff Sergeant Vernon Randall wiped the desert sand from his rifle scope, his weathered hands steady despite the 115-degree heat of Kandahar province. At 32, he'd spent the last decade serving his country, earning respect through 3 deployments and countless missions that never made the headlines. His unit called him Ice, not because he was cold, but because nothing could shake his composure. The satellite phone's ring cut through the evening briefing like a blade. Vernon rarely received calls during deployment. His parents had died in a car crash 5 years ago, and his younger sister Jessie was the only family he had left. She knew better than to call unless it was an emergency. Randall here. Sergeant Randall? This is Dr. James Swan from Mercy General Hospital in Cedar Falls. The voice was strained, careful. I'm calling about your sister, Jessie Randall. Vernon's blood turned cold. He stepped away from his squad, pressing the phone closer to his ear. What happened to her? She was found in an alley downtown 3 hours ago, barely alive. The doctor's voice dropped to a whisper. Sergeant, what I'm about to tell you can't leave this conversation. The man who did this, his father is Mayor Dick Shea. The boy's name is Chad Shea, and he's untouchable in this town. The police have already been told to look the other way. Vernon's grip tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. How bad is she? Broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe trauma to her face, and... Dr. Swan paused. Sergeant, she was sexually assaulted. She's stable now, but she's asking for you. She says you're her only chance for justice. The phone nearly shattered in Vernon's hand. Jessie was only 26, a kindergarten teacher who volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends. She'd never hurt a soul in her life. The image of her broken and beaten made something dark and primal stir in Vernon's chest. I'll be on the first flight home, he said, his voice deadly calm. Sergeant, there's something else. Chad Shea has done this before. There have been whispers, but his father's influence runs deep. The district attorney, the police chief, half the city council, they all owe their positions to Mayor Shea. This family has been untouchable for 20 years. Vernon closed his eyes, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. Doctor, keep her safe. Don't let anyone near her who isn't medical staff. I'll be there in 18 hours. As he ended the call, Captain Max Osborne approached. Everything all right, Ice? Vernon looked at his commanding officer, a man he'd served beside for 6 years. I need emergency leave, sir. Family emergency. Osborne studied Vernon's face and nodded without question. He'd seen that look before. It was the expression of a man who'd just declared war. Take all the time you need. Your replacement will handle the rest of your tour. 12 hours later, Vernon sat in a military transport plane heading stateside, his personal effects in a single duffel bag beside him. But hidden within his gear were items that weren't standard issue, tactical equipment he'd acquired over the years, surveillance devices, and contacts in various government agencies who owed him favors. He spent the flight researching everything he could about Cedar Falls, the Shea family, and their network of influence. Mayor Dick Shea had been in office for 15 years, elected on promises of economic development and family values. His son Chad was 29, a trust fund playboy with a sealed juvenile record and a string of dismissed charges that painted a picture of privilege protecting predator. What Vernon discovered made his jaw clench. 3 other women had come forward over the years with similar accusations against Chad Shea. Each time, the cases mysteriously fell apart. Witnesses recanted, evidence disappeared, victims suddenly left town. The pattern was clear. The Shea family had turned justice into a commodity they could afford to buy. As the plane descended toward Chicago, Vernon made a silent promise to his sister and to those other forgotten victims. Chad Shea had hurt his last innocent person. Mayor Dick Shea's protection racket was about to meet a soldier who understood that sometimes justice required a different kind of war. He wouldn't be seeing the next sunset, at least not as the untouchable prince of Cedar Falls. Chapter 2. Homecoming and Harsh Realities. Cedar Falls looked exactly as Vernon remembered from his last visit 2 years ago, a picturesque Midwestern town of 40,000, with tree-lined streets, a historic downtown, and the kind of small-town charm that attracted young families and retirees. What he hadn't noticed before was how many buildings bore plaques thanking the Shea Development Corporation for their generous community investment. Mercy General Hospital smelled of antiseptic and false hope. Vernon found Dr. James Swan in the ICU, a tired-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much human suffering. "You must be Sergeant Randall," Dr. Swan said, extending his hand. "Your sister has been asking for you every hour." "How is she?" Vernon's voice carried the controlled tension of a man barely holding himself together. "Physically, she'll recover. The internal bleeding has stopped, and the broken ribs will heal. But psychologically," Dr. Swan shook his head. "She hasn't spoken about what happened, but she keeps saying that justice won't come through normal channels. She said you'd understand what that means." Vernon understood perfectly. Jesse knew him better than anyone. She'd seen him deal with bullies in high school, watched him choose the military over college because he couldn't stand the idea of evil people hurting innocents without consequences. "Can I see her?" Jesse's room was dim, machines beeping softly around her hospital bed. When she saw Vernon, tears streamed down her bruised face. Her left eye was swollen shut, her lips split, and fingerprint bruises circled her throat like a grotesque necklace. "Vernon," she whispered, reaching for his hand with trembling fingers. "I knew you'd come." He sat beside her bed, taking her hand gently. "Tell me what happened, Jess." "I was leaving the school late, grading papers. It was around 9 p.m. He was waiting in the parking lot. Said he'd been watching me." Her voice broke. "He said his daddy taught him that women like me needed to learn their place." Vernon's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice soft. "Did anyone see? Any cameras?" He made sure there weren't any witnesses. "Vernon, he knew things about my routine, where I lived, when I'd be alone. This wasn't random. He'd been planning it." "What did the police say?" Jesse's laugh was bitter. "Detective Ted Huber took my statement, seemed sympathetic. But then Captain Roland Stanton came in, and suddenly everything changed. They said without witnesses or DNA evidence, it would be my word against Chad's. They suggested I might be mistaken about who attacked me." Vernon stood up, pacing to the window. Cedar Falls spread out below them, looking peaceful and normal. But he now saw it for what it really was, a town where money and influence could buy silence and immunity. "There's more," Jesse continued. "After the police left, a woman came to see me. Jenny Fry. She said she was a victim's advocate, but she was really here to make me an offer." "What kind of offer?" $50,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement. She said accidents happen, and sometimes it's better to move forward rather than pursue justice that might never come. When I refused, she mentioned how difficult it would be for a teacher with a reputation to find work in this state. Vernon turned back to his sister, his expression deadly calm. "They threatened your career. And yours. She knew about your military service, said it would be unfortunate if false accusations against a prominent family led to an investigation of your combat record. She had details, Vernon, things that should be classified." The pieces clicked into place in Vernon's mind. The Shea family didn't just own the local authorities. They had connections reaching into federal agencies. This wasn't just small-town corruption. It was a network designed to protect Chad Shea no matter what he did. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit entered without invitation, followed by Jenny Fry, a sharp-faced woman with calculating eyes. "Ms. Randall," the man said with a politician's practiced smile, "I'm Gordon Briggs, the Shea family's attorney. I understand you've had a traumatic experience, and we want to help." Vernon stepped between the lawyer and his sister's bed. "She's not interested in your help." Briggs looked Vernon up and down dismissively. "You must be the soldier brother." "Let me be clear. My client was at a charity function with 200 witnesses the night in question. Your sister was obviously the victim of a random attack, and her trauma has confused her memory. We're prepared to be generous in helping with her medical bills, but only if she stops making false accusations." "Get out," Vernon said quietly. "I don't think you understand the situation," Jenny Fry interjected. "Chad Shea is an upstanding citizen. Your sister's accusations could ruin his reputation and his family's standing in this community. That kind of damage has consequences. Vernon took a step forward, and both lawyers instinctively backed toward the door. I understand perfectly. Now get out before I throw you out. After they left, Vernon sat back down beside Jesse's bed. His sister was watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. They're not going to stop, are they? She asked. No, Vernon replied, his mind already formulating plans. But neither am I. They made one crucial mistake, Jess. What's that? Vernon's smile was cold as winter. They threatened someone a United States Army Ranger loves more than his own life. Chad Shea thinks he's untouchable, but he's never faced an enemy who has nothing left to lose. Chapter 3: Reconnaissance and Allies. Vernon spent his first week back in Cedar Falls conducting what he called battlefield reconnaissance. He rented a modest apartment across town using cash and a fake identity he'd cultivated during his military service, then systematically mapped the enemy's territory and resources. The Shea family's influence was more extensive than he'd initially realized. Mayor Dick Shea sat at the center of a web that included the police department, district attorney's office, city council, and major business interests. But Vernon's military training had taught him that every network had weak points and every fortress had vulnerabilities. His first breakthrough came at Murphy's Tavern, a blue-collar bar on the wrong side of the tracks where off-duty cops and city workers gathered after hours. Vernon, dressed in worn jeans and a baseball cap, nursing a beer and keeping his ears open, overheard a conversation that made him lean closer. Third girl this year, Detective Antonio Bonner was saying to his partner, Detective Elmer Field. Same M.O. as the others. Isolated victim, no witnesses, family suddenly disappears or drops charges. Keep your voice down, Field replied nervously. Captain Stannon made it clear we're not pursuing the Randall case. It ain't right, Elmer. I've got daughters. If some rich boy hurt one of them, then you'd end up directing traffic in the middle of nowhere like what happened to Detective Cameron Melton when he tried to investigate the Morrison girls' assault last year. Vernon filed the names away. Detective Bonner seemed to have a conscience, and Cameron Melton might be an ally. He left the bar and spent the next 2 days tracking down Melton, finding him working security at a shopping mall 40 miles outside town. Cameron Melton was a 15-year veteran of the Cedar Falls Police Department before his voluntary transfer to nowhere. He was bitter, angry, and surprisingly willing to talk when Vernon approached him during a coffee break. You're Jesse Randall's brother, Melton said without preamble. Word gets around. You're wasting your time if you think the system will work. I'm not counting on the system, Vernon replied. I want to know about the Morrison girl you investigated. Melton's expression darkened. Sonia Grady, 19 years old, community college student. Chad Shea raped her after a party, left her for dead in Riverside Park. She came forward, filed charges, did everything right. What happened? The usual. Witnesses recanted. Security footage from the party mysteriously disappeared. The DA found inconsistencies in her story. But I kept digging, and I found something interesting. Vernon waited. Chad Shea has a pattern. Every 6 months or so, he picks a target, usually someone isolated from a working-class family with no connections. He stalks them for weeks, learns their routines, then strikes when they're most vulnerable. It's not random violence. It's systematic predation. How many victims? That I can prove? 7 over the past 5 years. But I suspect there are more who never came forward. Melton pulled out his phone and showed Vernon a photograph of a young woman with short blonde hair and kind eyes. This was Sonia. She moved to California after the charges were dropped. Last I heard, she was doing better, but she'll never be the same. Vernon studied the photo, memorizing the face of another innocent person Chad Shea had destroyed. Where can I find her? Why? Because I'm going to give her and the others something the system never could: justice. Melton studied Vernon for a long moment, recognizing something familiar in the soldier's eyes. San Diego. She works as a victim's advocate now, helping other women who've been through what she experienced. But Vernon, and I'm guessing that's not your real name here, whatever you're planning, be careful. The Shea family has resources you can't imagine. So do I. That evening, Vernon made 2 phone calls. The first was to Master Sergeant Jay Cunningham, his former squad leader who now worked private security in Los Angeles. Nice. Heard you took emergency leave. Everything all right? I need a favor, Jay. How quickly can you get to San Diego? Depends on what you need. Vernon explained the situation in broad terms. Jay's response was immediate. I'll be there tomorrow. Anyone who hurts family needs to answer for it. The second call was to Caitlin Lee, a cybersecurity expert he'd worked with during a joint operation in Syria. She'd left the military to start her own consulting firm, specializing in digital forensics and information retrieval. Vernon Randall, she said warmly. This is a surprise. What can I do for you? I need someone's digital life turned inside out. Someone who thinks he's too smart to leave evidence. This wouldn't happen to be related to why you're back stateside early, would it? It might be. Send me the details. Consider it a favor between friends. By the end of the week, Vernon had assembled the beginnings of a team. Jay for muscle and tactical support, Caitlin for digital warfare, Cameron Melton for inside information, and potentially Detective Bonner as a source within the police department. But his most important discovery came when he visited Jessie at the hospital on Friday evening. She was doing better physically, scheduled to be discharged the following week, but her eyes still held the haunted look of someone whose world had been shattered. I've been thinking about what you said, she told him, about getting justice. I want to help. Jess, you've been through enough. No. Her voice was stronger than he'd heard since his return. Those lawyers, they came back twice more this week. Each time, the offer got bigger and the threats got more specific. They mentioned you by name, Vernon. They know things about your service record that are classified. Vernon's blood chilled. What kind of things? Operations in Afghanistan. Names of people you worked with. They said false accusations against their client might lead to an investigation of irregularities in your military service. The threat was clear. Fabricate evidence of war crimes or violations of military law to destroy Vernon's reputation and freedom. But it also revealed something crucial. The Shea family was scared enough to overreach, which meant they were vulnerable. There's something else, Jessie continued. Dr. Swan gave me a message from another victim. She heard about my case and wants to meet. Her name is Virginia Hamilton, and she says she has evidence that could destroy Chad Shea. Vernon felt the first spark of hope since receiving that devastating phone call in Afghanistan. The hunt was about to begin, and this time, the predator was about to become the prey. Chapter 4. The Network Exposed. Virginia Hamilton lived in a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked few questions. She was 28, with auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that held the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said as she let Vernon and Jessie into her small but tidy apartment. Most people don't want to hear what I have to say about the Shea family. Well, not most people, Vernon replied, noting the security cameras in the hallway and the reinforced door locks. You've been careful. I had to be. After what happened to me, I learned that surviving Chad Shea is only the first challenge. Staying alive afterward is the second. Virginia's story began 3 years ago when she worked as a paralegal at a prestigious law firm downtown. Chad Shea had been a client fighting a civil lawsuit over a real estate deal, and she'd been assigned to his case. He started small, she explained, pouring coffee with hands that still trembled slightly. Inappropriate comments, standing too close, finding excuses to touch my hand or shoulder. When I reported it to my supervisor, I was told that Mr. Shea was an important client and I should be more professional. Vernon's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. The attack happened after the case was settled. He followed me to the parking garage, and she paused, collecting herself. Afterward, he said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never worked in this state again. But I reported it anyway. What happened? The same thing that happened to your sister. Police took the report, seemed sympathetic, then suddenly decided there wasn't enough evidence. But I was smarter than Chad gave me credit for. I'd been documenting his harassment for months. Emails, text messages, witness statements from co-workers. Virginia walked to a safe hidden behind a framed photograph and retrieved a manila envelope thick with documents. I also started investigating the other victims. Chad isn't just a predator. He's a systematic one. He keeps trophies. She spread photographs across her coffee table, each showing a piece of jewelry, rings, necklaces, bracelets. I found his private social media accounts, the ones his handlers don't monitor. He posts photos of these items with coded captions. Each piece belonged to one of his victims. Vernon studied the photographs, his trained eye noting the careful composition and lighting. He's proud of what he does. More than that, he's addicted to it. The thrill isn't just in the attack, it's in the aftermath. Knowing he destroyed someone's life and got away with it. Jesse leaned forward, pointing to a silver bracelet with a distinctive butterfly charm. I remember that. Sonia Grady was wearing it in her college ID photo. Exactly. And this one, Virginia, pointed to a jade ring, belonged to Marcella Little. She was a waitress at the country club, attacked 2 years ago in the club's parking lot. She left town the next week. Vernon's phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin Lee. Found something big. Can you talk? He stepped outside to make the call, while Virginia continued showing Jesse her research. Vernon, I've been going through Chad Shay's digital life like you asked. On the surface, he's clean, too clean. But I found some interesting backdoors. What kind of backdoors? The kind that suggests someone else is monitoring his online activity and sanitizing it regularly. Professional-grade digital cleaning, the kind that costs serious money. His father? Bigger than that. I traced the digital footprint to a company called Apex Security Solutions. They specialize in reputation management and crisis containment for high-profile clients. Politicians, celebrities, executives, people who can't afford scandals. Vernon felt pieces clicking into place. What else did you find? Encrypted communications between Chad and someone using the handle Fixer. The messages are coded, but the timestamps correspond with dates when other women reported assaults. Vernon, they're not just covering up Chad's crimes after the fact. They're helping him select and stalk his targets. The revelation hit Vernon like a physical blow. This wasn't just about a spoiled, rich kid with violent tendencies. It was an organized operation designed to enable and protect a predator. There's more, Caitlin continued. I found financial records showing payments from the Shay family's accounts to various officials in Cedar Falls. Police department, district attorney's office, even some judges. It's a comprehensive bribery network. Can you prove it? With time, yes. But Vernon, these people are professionals. If they realize someone's investigating, they'll cover their tracks quickly. Vernon returned to Virginia's apartment, where she was showing Jesse a detailed timeline of Chad's attacks. I've been tracking his pattern for 3 years, Virginia explained. He targets women who are isolated, hardworking, and unlikely to be believed if they come forward. Teachers, students, service workers, people without connections or resources. How many victims have you identified? Definitely 7, possibly 12. But here's the thing. I think someone else is helping him choose targets. The information he has about his victims is too detailed, too specific. Someone with access to employment records, school files, even medical information. Vernon shared what Caitlin had discovered about Apex Security Solutions and the Fixer communications. Virginia's face went pale. That explains how he knew about my therapy sessions. Information I'd only shared with my counselor started showing up in the threatening messages I received after I filed the police report. What kind of messages? She retrieved her phone and scrolled through saved screenshots. See this? Maybe you should focus on healing instead of false accusations. How did they know I was in therapy? Or this one. Your medical records show a history of depression. That might affect your credibility. Vernon studied the messages, noting the sophisticated psychological warfare behind each one. Whoever the fixer was, they understood how to weaponize a victim's trauma against them. Virginia, I need you to do something for me, he said. I need you to reach out to the other victims, the ones you've identified. Tell them there's finally someone willing to fight back, but we need their evidence. Most of them won't talk. They're too scared. Then we make them less scared, and Chad, Shay more so. It's time to turn the hunter into the hunted. As Vernon left Virginia's apartment, his phone buzzed with another message. This one from Jay Cunningham in San Diego. Found Sonia Grady. You're going to want to hear what she has to say. This goes deeper than we thought. The war Vernon had declared was about to expand, and he was beginning to understand that Chad Shea wasn't just a predator. He was the tip of a much larger and more dangerous network. Chapter 5. The Hunter's Tools. The warehouse on the outskirts of Cedar Falls had been abandoned for 5 years, a casualty of the economic downturn that had hit the region's manufacturing base. To the city's records, it was condemned property awaiting demolition. To Vernon Randall, it was the perfect base of operations for unconventional warfare. Jay Cunningham arrived on a Tuesday morning, driving a nondescript panel van loaded with equipment that would have made a SWAT team envious. At 35, Jay was built like a linebacker, but moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent a decade in special operations. His scarred face and cool gray eyes spoke of experiences that weren't discussed in polite company. This place will work, Jay said, surveying the empty warehouse space. Good sight lines, multiple escape routes, and isolated enough that we won't draw attention. Vernon had spent the previous week preparing the space. Generator power, basic furniture, whiteboards for planning, and a sophisticated communications setup courtesy of surplus military equipment he'd acquired over the years. What did Sonia Grady tell you? Vernon asked as they began unloading Jay's equipment. Jay's expression darkened. She told me about the others, victims who never made it into Virginia Hamilton's research because they left the state or were too terrorized to come forward. But she also told me about something else, a private club. What kind of club? The kind where rich men gather to share stories about their conquests. Chad Shea isn't just a lone predator, Vernon. He's part of a group. The revelation hit Vernon like a sledgehammer. How many are we talking about? Sonia wasn't sure of exact numbers, but she overheard Chad bragging to someone on the phone about initiation requirements and earning membership. She thinks there are at least 6 members locally, possibly more in other cities. Vernon began pacing the warehouse floor, his tactical mind processing the implications. A predator ring. They're sharing methods, protecting each other, maybe even coordinating attacks. It gets worse. Sonia said Chad mentioned something about special events, gatherings where members bring victims for the group's entertainment. The warehouse fell silent except for the humming of the generator. Vernon had seen evil during his military service. Terrorists who beheaded innocents, war criminals who used children as human shields. But this was different. This was systematic evil hidden behind respectability and protected by wealth. His phone buzzed with a call from Caitlin Lee. I've got updates on the Apex security situation. Are you somewhere secure? Vernon put the call on speaker. Go ahead, Caitlin. I've been digging deeper into their client list. Apex doesn't just handle reputation management. They specialize in what they call problem resolution for wealthy clients with criminal liability issues. Their CEO is a former CIA operative named Dick Gross, and their client list reads like a who's who of untouchable criminals. What kind of services do they provide? Evidence elimination, witness intimidation, media manipulation, and something they call permanent problem resolution. Jay and Vernon exchanged a look. In their world, permanent resolution meant only one thing. Caitlin, how close are you to cracking their communications? Closer than they'd like, but this is professional-grade encryption. I need more time, and I need physical access to their systems if possible. Where are they located? Chicago, but they have a satellite office here in Cedar Falls. Small place, probably just a front, but it might have the access point I need. Vernon walked to the warehouse's main whiteboard and began sketching a network diagram. Chad Shea at the center, connected to his father, the mayor, Apex Security Solutions, local officials, and now this mysterious predator club. We're not just fighting one criminal, he said to Jay. We're fighting an entire ecosystem designed to enable and protect predators. Then we dismantle it piece by piece. Jay replied simply, Where do we start? Vernon's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Your sister is healing well. It would be unfortunate if she experienced a relapse due to stress. Stop investigating or face the consequences. A concerned citizen. Vernon showed the message to Jay, whose face went stone cold. They're threatening Jesse, which means we're making them nervous. Vernon turned back to the whiteboard. Caitlin, I need you to trace that message and get me everything you can on Apex's local operations. Jay, we need to accelerate our timeline. What about the other victims? Virginia Hamilton said she'd reach out to them. As if summoned by their conversation, Vernon's phone rang. Virginia Hamilton's voice was tight with fear. Vernon, we have a problem. I reached out to 3 of the other victims like you asked. 2 of them hung up immediately, but Marcella Little agreed to meet. She was supposed to come to my apartment an hour ago. Maybe she changed her mind? No, you don't understand. I drove past her house. There are 2 police cars in the driveway, and I saw them loading someone into an ambulance. Vernon felt his blood turn to ice. We'll be right there. As they grabbed their gear and headed for Jay's van, Vernon's mind was already shifting into combat mode. The enemy had escalated, which meant they were desperate, but also meant they'd made their first tactical error. Desperate enemies made mistakes, and Vernon Randall had built a career on exploiting his enemies' mistakes. Jay, he said as they pulled out of the warehouse parking lot, it's time to show these people what happens when you threaten a ranger's family. The war was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 6, Lines Crossed. Marcella Little's house was a small ranch-style home in a working-class neighborhood where lawn ornaments and American flags spoke to the quiet pride of people who worked hard for modest lives. The ambulance was pulling away as Vernon and Jay arrived, and the 2 police cars in the driveway belonged to officers they recognized from their surveillance. Vernon parked 3 blocks away and used military-grade binoculars to observe the scene. Detective Ted Huber was talking to neighbors while another officer strung crime scene tape around the property. Overdose, Jay said, listening to a police scanner through an earpiece. Apparent suicide by prescription medication. Bullshit, Vernon replied flatly. Marcella Little was a devout Catholic who worked double shifts to support her disabled mother. She didn't kill herself. Vernon's phone buzzed with a call from Virginia Hamilton. They killed her, didn't they? She said without preamble. Where are you? Safe house. I packed everything and left my apartment 20 minutes ago. Vernon, Marcella called me this morning before she was supposed to come over. She said she'd found something, evidence that could expose the whole network. What kind of evidence? She worked part-time cleaning offices downtown, including the building where Apex Security has their local office. She'd been taking photos of documents with her phone, building her own case file. Vernon felt pieces clicking into place. They found out she had evidence and eliminated her. It gets worse. I tried calling the other 2 victims I contacted. One of them, Danielle Bradshaw, moved to Florida last year. Her roommate said she died in a car accident last week, the same day I first reached out to her. The pattern was becoming clear. The network wasn't just protecting Chad Shea. They were systematically eliminating anyone who could threaten their operation. Virginia, we need to meet. Somewhere public, lots of witnesses. The Cedar Falls Library, main branch. There's a coffee shop inside, always busy. An hour later, Vernon sat across from Virginia Hamilton in the library's cafe, noting how she'd changed her appearance. Different hair color, glasses, clothing that made her look like a college student rather than a professional researcher. They're cleaning house, she said quietly, sliding a flash drive across the table. That contains everything I've compiled over the past 3 years. Names, dates, evidence, financial records, everything I could gather about Chad Shea and his network. Why are you giving this to me? Because I'm leaving town tonight. I've got a new identity, enough money to start over, and friends who can help me disappear. But I want to know that bastard will pay for what he did to all of us. Vernon pocketed the flash drive. He will, but I need something else from you. Marcella's phone number. If she was photographing documents from Apex's office, those images might still be backed up to a cloud service. Virginia provided the information, then leaned forward. Vernon, there's something else. Marcella mentioned seeing Chad Shea at the office building, but not during business hours. She said he came by late at night, always with the same older man. Description: white hair, expensive suits, walked with a slight limp, drove a black Mercedes with personalized plates. Vernon made a note. The description didn't match anyone in Chad's known circle. which meant the network was larger than they'd realized. After Virginia left, Vernon called Caitlin Lee. I need you to do two things. First, access Marcella Little's cloud storage, all major services. See what she might have backed up automatically. Second, run a search for black Mercedes registrations in the Cedar Falls area with personalized plates. Already on it. I've also been monitoring police communications. Marcella Little's death is being ruled a suicide. Case closed. No autopsy, no investigation. How is that possible? Simple. The coroner, Dr. Lester Kelly, is on Apex's payroll. I found the payments in their financial records. Vernon felt the familiar cold rage building in his chest. The corruption went deeper than he'd imagined. They'd compromised the very people responsible for seeking truth and justice for the dead. His phone buzzed with a text from Jay. Hospital situation. Come now. Vernon's blood turned to ice. He raced across town to Mercy General, where he found Jay in the ICU waiting room, his face grim. What happened? Someone tried to inject something into Jesse's foreline. Nurse caught them in the act, but the intruder got away. Security cameras? Conveniently malfunctioned an hour before the incident. But the nurse got a good look. White male, mid-40s, wearing scrubs and a surgical mask. He knew exactly which room she was in and how to access her for without triggering alarms. Vernon pushed past Jay toward Jesse's room, where Dr. Swan was checking her vitals. She's fine, the doctor assured him quickly. Nurse Jen Sanford stopped him before he could inject anything. But Mr. Randall, this was a professional attempt. Whoever sent him new hospital procedures and had legitimate access credentials. Where is she now? We moved her to a secure wing. Private security, limited access. But Dr. Swan hesitated. But what? I received a call from the hospital administrator an hour ago. There's been a review of your sister's case, and her insurance coverage is being questioned. They want to discharge her tomorrow. Vernon's hands clenched into fists. They're trying to force her out where she'll be vulnerable. That's my assessment as well. Mr. Randall, I've been practicing medicine for 25 years, and I've never seen this level of systematic intimidation. Whatever you're planning to do about this situation, do it quickly. That evening, Vernon stood in the abandoned warehouse, staring at the network diagram he'd drawn on the whiteboard. The connections between Chad Shea, his father, Apex Security, corrupt officials, and now apparent contract killers painted a picture of an organization that had evolved far beyond simple crime family corruption. Jay was cleaning weapons with the methodical precision of a professional soldier. Rules of engagement? He asked without looking up. Vernon considered the question. They'd crossed the line when they tried to murder Jessie in her hospital bed. The gloves were officially off. No more surveillance. No more evidence gathering. They want to escalate to attempted murder. We'll give them a war they can't win. His phone buzzed with a call from Caitlin. Vernon, I found something in Marcella's cloud storage that changes everything. You need to see this immediately. What is it? Proof that Chad Shea isn't just part of a predator ring. He's the recruitment coordinator. And their next target is already selected. Vernon's blood ran cold. Who? Pauline Grant. 19 years old, community college student, worked part-time at the campus bookstore. According to the documents Marcella photographed, the initiation event is scheduled for tomorrow night. The hunt was over. Tomorrow night, Vernon Randall would remind Cedar Falls what happened when someone threatened his family and innocent people under his protection. Chad Shea and his network were about to learn that some wars couldn't be won with money and influence. Chapter 7. The Predator's Last Hunt. Pauline Grant had no idea she was walking into a trap. The 19-year-old community college student left her evening psychology class, as she did every Thursday, backpack slung over her shoulder, earbuds in, completely unaware that 3 men in a black SUV were following her toward the parking lot. But Vernon Randall knew. He'd spent the previous 18 hours studying every detail of Pauline's routine, the campus layout, and the attack plan he'd found in Marcella Little's photographs. What Chad Shea's network didn't know was that they were walking into their own trap. Overwatch in position. Jay Cunningham's voice crackled through Vernon's earpiece. From his position on the campus library's roof, Jay had sight lines covering the entire area. Digital surveillance is live, Caitlin Lee confirmed from her mobile command center parked 2 blocks away. I'm recording everything. Video, audio, communications. Whatever happens tonight will be documented. Vernon crouched behind a maintenance building 30 yards from where Chad Shea waited with 2 older men in expensive suits. Through night vision binoculars, he could see Chad pacing nervously while his companions remained calm and professional. This was clearly a regular operation for them. Movement on the north side, Jay reported. Target is approaching the kill zone. Pauline walked across the parking lot, completely oblivious to the danger. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with long dark hair and the kind of innocent face that belonged on college recruitment brochures. Vernon thought of Jesse at that age, full of hope and trust in a world that seemed safe and orderly. Here we go, Vernon murmured as Chad Shea stepped out from behind a van. Excuse me, miss? Chad called out in his practiced, charming voice. I think you dropped this. Pauline stopped, pulling out her earbuds. She was 20 feet from where the other men waited in the shadows. I'm sorry. Chad held up what looked like a student ID card. I saw this fall from your backpack. Pauline, right? The girl's face lit up with gratitude as she approached. Oh my God, thank you so much. I would have been in so much trouble if I lost that. She was 10 feet away when Vernon made his move. Chad Shea. Vernon's voice cut through the night like a blade. Step away from the girl. Chad spun around, his face going white as Vernon emerged from the shadows. The 2 older men immediately moved to flank positions, their movements suggesting military or law enforcement training. You're making a mistake, one of them said calmly. He was the white-haired man Virginia had described, clearly the leader of this operation. Walk away. Pauline looked between Vernon and the 3 men, confusion turning to fear as she realized something was very wrong. Pauline, Vernon said without taking his eyes off Chad, call 911 and run toward the library. Now, the girl didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted toward the well-lit campus buildings while fumbling for her phone. You can't prove anything, Chad said, his voice higher than usual. This is just a coincidence. You were just planning to rape and possibly murder an innocent 19-year-old girl, Vernon interrupted. But the thing is, Chad, I've been documenting your activities for weeks. Every victim, every cover-up, every payoff. The white-haired man's hand moved toward his jacket, but Jay's voice crackled through Vernon's earpiece. I've got him. One word, and he's down. I wouldn't, Vernon advised. My spotter has a very itchy trigger finger, and frankly, we're all tired of pretending you people deserve to breathe. You don't understand what you're dealing with, the white-haired man said. This organization has resources. Had resources, Vernon corrected. Past tense. While you were planning tonight's attack, my people were busy dismantling your network. Caitlin's voice confirmed through his earpiece. FBI just raided Apex Security's Chicago headquarters. Financial records are being seized. The whole network is compromised. Vernon smiled coldly. Did you really think a few corrupt local cops could protect you from federal investigators? I've been building a case for weeks, and tonight was just the final evidence I needed. Chad looked desperately at his companions. You said this couldn't happen. You said we were protected. Shut up, you idiot, the white-haired man snapped. But Chad was panicking now, his composure completely shattered. I want immunity. I'll testify against all of them. The mayor, the judges, everyone on the payroll. Vernon's earpiece crackled with updates. Police units responding. ETA, 3 minutes, from Caitlin and federal agents en route. Detective Bonner is with them, from another voice he didn't recognize. The thing is, Vernon said, walking closer to Chad, I don't actually need your testimony. I have financial records, victim statements, video evidence, and a complete breakdown of your operation. What I really wanted was to look you in the eye when your world came crashing down. Sirens could be heard in the distance, growing louder. But here's the best part, Vernon continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Tonight isn't about arresting you. Tonight is about something much more permanent. Chad's face went pale. What do you mean? Vernon reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope thick with documents. Every detail of your crimes, every victim's story, every piece of evidence. It's all going public tomorrow morning. Not just locally, nationally. He threw the envelope at Chad's feet. Your father's political career is over. Your family's business empire will collapse under the scandal. Every victim you've hurt will have their day in court, and you'll spend the rest of your life in a federal penitentiary. The sirens were getting closer, and Vernon could see flashlights approaching from multiple directions. But the real justice, Vernon said, stepping so close that Chad could see the fury in his eyes, is that you'll spend every day in prison knowing that you're not untouchable anymore. You're just another predator who found out what happens when you hurt the wrong person's family. Police cars screeched into the parking lot, their lights illuminating the scene in harsh white and blue. But these weren't the corrupt local cops who'd been covering for Chad. These were federal agents, led by Detective Antonio Bonner, who had finally found the courage to do what was right. Chad Shea, Agent Terry Nolan called out, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. You have the right to remain silent." As Chad was handcuffed and led away, he looked back at Vernon with a mixture of rage and terror. "This isn't over. Your father is being arrested at his home right now," Vernon replied calmly, "along with everyone else in your network. It's very much over, Chad." The white-haired man, whom Vernon now knew was Dr. Enrique Steele, a former CIA operative who'd built Apex Security into a criminal enterprise, said nothing as he was arrested. But his eyes met Vernon's with the recognition of one professional acknowledging another. As the police cars drove away with their prisoners, Jay climbed down from his sniper position while Caitlin emerged from her mobile command center. "It's done," Jay said simply. "No," Vernon replied, watching the taillights disappear into the night. "Now it's done." His phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Swan at the hospital. "Mr. Randall, I thought you should know. Your sister is asking for you. She says she's ready to testify." For the first time in weeks, Vernon Randall smiled. Chapter 8. Justice Served. The federal courthouse in Cedar Falls had never seen a media circus like the one that surrounded the trial of Chad Shea and his criminal network. Reporters from national news outlets filled the steps, while inside, the largest courtroom in the building was packed with victims, their families, and citizens who had lived under the Shea family's influence for 2 decades. Vernon sat in the gallery's front row, watching as his sister Jessie took the witness stand. 3 months of recovery had returned strength to her voice and steel to her spine. She wore a simple blue dress that made her look professional and dignified, nothing like the broken woman he'd found in the hospital bed. "Ms. Randall," Prosecutor Agent Roland Stanton said gently, "can you tell the court what happened on the night of March 15th? Jessie's voice was clear and steady as she recounted the attack. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, and Chad Shea was staring at his hands, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "And during your recovery, did anyone attempt to intimidate you or your family?" "Yes. The defendant's lawyers offered me money to sign a non-disclosure agreement. When I refused, they threatened my career and my brother's military service. Then someone tried to inject an unknown substance into my foreline while I was in the hospital." The jury's faces showed shock and disgust. These weren't just crimes of violence. They were crimes of systematic oppression and intimidation. Chad's defense attorney, a high-priced lawyer from Chicago, had spent 3 days trying to paint his client as a victim of circumstance and false accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming, and more damaging testimony came from unexpected sources. Dr. Enrique Steele, the former CIA operative who'd run Apex Security, had taken a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. His calm, professional demeanor made his words even more chilling. "The defendant and his father retained our services to manage what they termed reputation issues," Steele testified. "Our initial contract involved standard crisis management, media control, witness intimidation, evidence elimination. But over time, the scope expanded." "In what way?" "We began providing proactive services, target identification, surveillance, attack planning, and post-incident cleanup. The defendant wasn't just a client. He was a partner in what became a systematic criminal enterprise." Steele's testimony revealed the full scope of the operation: 12 confirmed victims over 5 years, with potential victims in 3 other states where Chad had traveled. Financial records showed payments to judges, prosecutors, police officials, and even federal agents who had looked the other way. But the most devastating testimony came from the victims themselves. Sonia Grady had flown in from California, her victim advocacy work having given her the strength to face her attacker in court. Virginia Hamilton testified via secure video link from her undisclosed location. Even Marcella Little's voice was heard through recordings she'd made before her murder, detailing the evidence she'd gathered. Mayor Dick Shea, testifying from his own federal prison cell, tried to distance himself from his son's crimes. But financial records and recorded phone calls painted a picture of a father who had actively enabled and protected his son's predatory behavior. "I thought I was helping my boy," the former mayor said, his political polish replaced by the desperate whining of a broken man. "I never thought it would go this far." Vernon took the stand on the trial's final day. He wore his dress uniform, every ribbon and medal a testament to his service and sacrifice for his country. "Sergeant Randall," the prosecutor asked, "what motivated you to investigate this network?" "My sister was brutally attacked, and the local authorities made it clear that the perpetrator was untouchable," Vernon replied. "As a soldier, I swore an oath to protect the innocent. That oath doesn't end at the borders of foreign countries." "Did you consider working within the system?" "The system was compromised. Local police, prosecutors, judges, they were all on the defendant's payroll. Sometimes justice requires unconventional methods." Chad's lawyer tried to portray Vernon as a vigilante who had overstepped his authority. But Vernon's calm professionalism and the overwhelming evidence of corruption made those attacks fall flat. "Sergeant Randall, do you have any regrets about your actions?" Vernon looked directly at Chad Shea, who finally raised his eyes to meet his gaze. "My only regret is that it took so long for these victims to get justice." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Chad Shea was found guilty on all counts. Multiple charges of sexual assault, kidnapping, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and under federal RICO statutes, running a criminal enterprise. His sentence: life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Dr. Enrique Steele received 25 years. Mayor Dick Shea got 15 years, his political legacy destroyed, and his business empire in ruins. The corrupt officials throughout Cedar Falls faced their own trials and sentences, dismantling a network of corruption that had poisoned the town for decades. As the courtroom emptied, Vernon stood with Jesse on the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions, but neither sibling was interested in commentary. "It's really over?" Jesse asked quietly. "It's over," Vernon confirmed. "Chad Shea will die in prison. His network is destroyed." And every victim finally got their day in court. Dr. James Swan approached them, having attended every day of the trial. "Ms. Randall, I wanted you to know that the hospital has established a victim advocacy program in your honor. We're also implementing new security protocols to ensure nothing like this can happen again." Jesse smiled, the first genuine smile Vernon had seen from her since his return from deployment. "Thank you, Dr. Swan, for everything." As they walked away from the courthouse, Vernon's phone buzzed with messages from Jay, Caitlin, and other members of their team. The operation was complete, the mission accomplished. But Vernon knew that the real victory wasn't in the courtroom or the prison sentences. It was in the fact that Jessie was walking with her head held high, that Sonia Grady had found the strength to testify, that Virginia Hamilton could finally stop hiding. Evil had been exposed, justice had been served, and the innocent could sleep safely again. For a soldier who had spent his career protecting people from monsters, that was victory enough. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 6 months after the trial, Cedar Falls was a different town. The corruption that had poisoned its institutions was being systematically rooted out, and new leadership was working to rebuild trust between the community and its public servants. Detective Antonio Bonner had been promoted to police chief, and his first act was implementing comprehensive reforms and accountability measures. Vernon Randall stood in the empty warehouse that had served as his command center during the investigation. The whiteboards had been erased, the equipment packed away, and the space was returning to its abandoned state. but the memories of what had been accomplished here would stay with him forever. Penny, for your thoughts? Jesse's voice came from behind him. She looked healthier than she had in months, her face having lost the haunted expression that had defined her since the attack. Just remembering, Vernon replied. This place saw a lot of planning, a lot of anger, and ultimately a lot of justice. Jesse joined him in the middle of the empty space. I got a call from Sonia Grady yesterday. She's starting a nonprofit organization to help other victims fight back against powerful predators. She wants to call it the Randall Foundation. Vernon raised an eyebrow. After us. After you, actually. She said what you did here proved that no one is truly untouchable if good people are willing to fight for justice. The irony wasn't lost on Vernon. He'd returned from war to find his own country's institutions compromised by the same corruption he'd fought overseas. But in the end, the principles were the same: protect the innocent, pursue justice, and never surrender to evil no matter how powerful it appears. His phone buzzed with a call from Jay Cunningham, who had returned to Los Angeles but stayed in regular contact. "I see you see the news?" "Which news?" 3 more cities have opened investigations based on the Apex security client list. Looks like your little war started a nationwide reckoning. Vernon wasn't surprised. Corruption rarely stayed contained to one location, and Apex's client records had revealed a network of wealthy predators operating under the protection of bot influence across multiple states. Any word on Steele's cooperation? He's singing like a canary. FBI estimates they'll make at least 50 more arrests based on his testimony. The man kept detailed records of every crime he helped cover up. After the call ended, Jessie studied her brother's expression. "You're thinking about leaving town, aren't you?" Vernon nodded slowly. "My work here is done. Chad Shea will die in prison. His network is destroyed, and the town is healing. But there are other places where predators think they're untouchable. Other sisters who need protecting. Something like that." Jessie was quiet for a long moment. "I understand. But Vernon, you can't fight the whole world's monsters by yourself." "I won't be by myself. Caitlin is starting a consulting firm that specializes in exposing corrupt networks. Jay's putting together a team of specialists for situations where traditional law enforcement can't or won't act. We're calling it something simple: Justice Solutions. Vigilantes for hire. Justice for people who can't get it any other way. Pro bono for victims, paid for by people who want to ensure monsters face consequences." Vernon's phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin. New case just came in. Senator's daughter in Montana. Similar pattern to Chad Shea. Local authorities compromised. Interested, he showed a message to Jessie, who read it and smiled sadly. Someone else needs their big brother. Yeah, someone else does. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both understanding that Vernon's war against predators and corruption wasn't ending. It was expanding. "Will you be careful?" Jessie asked finally. "I'll be smart. I'll be thorough. And I'll be absolutely ruthless when it comes to protecting innocent people from monsters." Vernon's phone rang again, this time with a call from Detective Cameron Melton, who had been reinstated to the Cedar Falls Police Department and promoted to lead a new task force investigating historical cases of covered-up crimes. "Vernon, I wanted to thank you again before you leave town. We've reopened 16 cases that were buried over the years. Real investigations this time, with real consequences. That's what matters, Cameron. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied, if good people are willing to keep fighting." As the sun set over Cedar Falls, Vernon and Jessie walked out of the warehouse together. Tomorrow, Vernon would drive to Montana to help another victim fight another monster. But tonight, he was content to know that his sister was safe, that justice had been served, and that the principles he'd sworn to defend as a soldier were alive and well in civilian life. "Vernon," Jessie called as they reached their cars. "Yeah. When you find that senator's daughter in Montana, tell her she's not alone. Tell her that sometimes the good guys really do win." Vernon smiled, thinking of Chad Shea in his federal prison cell, of Mayor Dick Shea stripped of power and influence, of all the victims who had finally received justice. "I'll tell her," he promised, "and I'll make sure she has the same chance we gave you, the chance to look her monster in the eye and watch him fall." As he drove away from Cedar Falls for what might be the last time, Vernon Randall reflected on the lessons learned during his personal war against corruption and evil. Money and influence could protect predators for a while, but they couldn't protect them from someone willing to sacrifice everything for justice. Somewhere in Montana, a young woman was waiting for help, probably not even knowing that help was coming. But Vernon knew, and that was enough. The hunter had become the hunted in Cedar Falls. Now, it was time to teach that lesson somewhere else. Justice, Vernon had learned, wasn't just about the law. It was about good people willing to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. And for as long as monsters preyed on the innocent, soldiers like Vernon Randall would be there to remind them that no one was truly untouchable. The war continued, one victory at a time.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will